Before we settle into tonight's journey, let your thoughts slow for a moment as we follow one of the oldest mysteries in the wizarding world. What really happened to the lost heirs of Salazar Slytherin? This is a story of forgotten bloodlines, hidden chambers, ancient families, and questions that linger long after the final page of the books. If you've traveled through these nighttime tales before, you might leave a note about which evening of listening this is for you. And if this is your first visit, simply say night one and join us beside the fading torchlight of Hogwarts' oldest secrets. Far beneath the castle, deeper than the dungeons where Severus Snape once taught potions, and farther below the black waters of the Great Lake, a single torch burns against stone, darkened by centuries of damp air. Its flame trembles whenever a draft moves through unseen cracks in the rock. The walls bear the mark of a serpent carved by hands that lived nearly 1,000 years ago. Water drips somewhere in the darkness with slow, patient rhythm. Above this hidden place, generations of students have slept in Gryffindor Tower, studied in Ravenclaw's lofty chambers, and walked the corridors without ever knowing what lay beneath their feet. Yet down here, where the Chamber of Secrets waited in silence, one question endured across the ages. What became of the descendants of the wizard who built it? Why did Salazar Slytherin leave behind a bloodline at all? The question sounds simple, yet the deeper you follow it, the stranger it becomes. According to the history preserved at Hogwarts, Slytherin was one of the 4 founders who established the school sometime around the 10th century, alongside Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, and Rowena Ravenclaw. For a time they worked together, creating a place where young witches and wizards could learn magic safely. Then came disagreement. Slytherin believed that students of Muggle parentage should not be admitted. Gryffindor opposed him. The dispute became so severe that Slytherin eventually abandoned the castle he had helped create, leaving behind not only bitter arguments, but a secret that would outlive every witness. The secret, of course, was the Chamber of Secrets itself. Hidden deep beneath Hogwarts, the chamber was constructed by Slytherin before his departure. Its existence became a legend repeated by generations of students, yet no teacher could prove it existed. Inside the chamber, according to the story later confirmed by Harry Potter himself, Slytherin concealed a basilisk, an enormous serpent capable of killing with a direct glance. The creature was intended to remain dormant until Slytherin's true heir arrived and unleashed it upon the school. This much is established in canon, yet there is a detail often overlooked. Slytherin did not leave instructions for a council. He did not create an order of followers. He entrusted everything to descendants who had not even been born. That decision raises another mystery. Salazar Slytherin could have hidden a key, an enchanted artifact, or a magical password accessible only to a chosen successor. Instead, he tied the chamber to blood. The entrance could be opened through Parseltongue, the rare language of serpents. This gift appeared within his family line generation after generation. Centuries later, Harry Potter would hear the eerie sounds of Parseltongue without understanding why. Tom Riddle would command the basilisk through it. The language itself became a hereditary marker linking descendants across vast stretches of time. Slytherin seems to have believed that blood would preserve his intentions better than any written record. As you sit beside that flickering torch in your imagination, it is worth remembering how little is actually known about the founder himself. The books provide fragments rather than a complete biography. We know he was exceptionally skilled, respected enough to help create Hogwarts, and powerful enough to leave magical constructions functioning centuries after his death. The chamber remained hidden for nearly a millennium. The basilisk survived through unknown enchantments. Even the entrance, concealed behind a sink in what later became Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, continued operating exactly as intended. These are not the works of an ordinary wizard. They suggest a mind that planned far beyond a single lifetime. Yet another question emerges from the shadows. If Slytherin expected his descendants to continue his mission, who were those descendants during the centuries immediately after his departure? Canon provides no complete answer. No names survive from the generations closest to the founder. No family records are presented. The historical gap stretches across hundreds of years. When wizarding history begins speaking clearly again, the line has already narrowed dramatically. Entire branches may have disappeared. Marriages may have joined the bloodline to other families. Some descendants may never have known their connection at all. The silence itself becomes part of the mystery. The wizarding world places great importance on ancestry, especially among old pure-blood families. Houses such as the Blacks, the Malfoys, the Lestranges, and the Prewetts carefully preserved family trees. The Black family tapestry displayed at number 12 Grimmauld Place is one famous example. Yet no comparable record of Slytherin's descendants survives in the books. Instead, the founder's line emerges from obscurity through a family already collapsing under the weight of its own obsession. By the time Albus Dumbledore investigated the ancestry of Tom Riddle, the proud line of Salazar Slytherin had become the impoverished and isolated Gaunt family living near Little Hangleton. The contrast is startling. Somewhere between founder and Gaunt, history seems to disappear into fog. Why does the trail become so difficult to follow? One answer lies in the nature of magical history itself. Wizards preserve remarkable records of spells, magical creatures, and famous events, yet ordinary lives often vanish from documentation. The exact construction dates of Hogwarts remain uncertain. Many details of medieval wizarding Britain are lost. Even powerful families rise and fall without leaving complete accounts behind. In that context, the missing heirs of Slytherin become part of a broader pattern. The centuries swallowed them. Names faded. Estates changed hands. Graves weathered away. What remained was not a list of descendants, but a handful of inherited traits and artifacts moving quietly through time. The strongest of those inherited traits was Parseltongue. Throughout the series, the ability appears only in a few confirmed individuals. Salazar Slytherin possessed it. The Gaunts possessed it. Tom Riddle possessed it. Harry Potter gained it accidentally through Voldemort's soul fragment. The rarity of the gift matters because it acts almost like a trail left through history. Whenever Parseltongue appears, the shadow of Slytherin appears nearby. When young Tom Riddle first spoke to snakes at Wool's orphanage before ever learning he was a wizard, he was unknowingly revealing a connection that stretched back nearly 1,000 years. Blood carried the ability forward long after knowledge of the family itself had faded. There is a haunting irony in all this. Salazar Slytherin built the chamber because he feared certain people did not belong at Hogwarts. He created a mechanism intended to preserve his beliefs far into the future. Yet as centuries passed, the world forgot almost everything about the descendants who were supposed to carry out that mission. The chamber endured, the basilisk endured, the language of serpents endured. The heirs themselves slipped into obscurity. Stone outlasted memory, magic outlasted names. The founder's greatest secret survived more successfully than the family entrusted to protect it. So as the torch continues to burn in the darkness beneath Hogwarts, another mystery slowly takes shape. If Salazar Slytherin's descendants were meant to safeguard his legacy, why do they vanish from history for so many centuries before the appearance of the Gaunts? Somewhere between the founder's departure from Hogwarts and the crumbling shack outside Little Hangleton lies a story almost entirely untold. It is there, in that long silence, that we will begin searching next. Why do nearly 8 centuries of Slytherin's family history seem to disappear into darkness? The question becomes more puzzling the longer you consider it. By the 20th century, wizarding Britain knew the names of ancient houses such as Black, Malfoy, Rosier, and Yaxley. Their genealogies appeared in records, family trees, and inherited estates. Yet the descendants of one of Hogwarts' founders seemed almost absent from public memory. When Albus Dumbledore reconstructed the history of the Gaunts, through ministry records, memories, and investigation, he uncovered a family living in poverty and isolation rather than influence and prestige. It is as though the bloodline of Salazar Slytherin had spent centuries retreating from the center of wizarding society. The first fully documented descendants we encounter are not wealthy aristocrats, but the Gaunts of Little Hangleton. Their home stood on a patch of neglected land overlooking the village churchyard. The building was little more than a crumbling stone shack. Harry later saw it through Dumbledore's pensive memories. Broken windows, overgrown vegetation, and walls leaning with age. This was not merely a poor family by wizarding standards. It was a family in visible decline. Yet inside that miserable dwelling rested objects of extraordinary significance, relics that connected its occupants directly to one of the greatest wizards in history. Why would the descendants of Salazar Slytherin choose such isolation? One answer emerges from their obsession with blood purity. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the Gaunts had become fanatically devoted to preserving what they believed was the purity of their lineage. Marriages occurred repeatedly between close relatives. Dumbledore explicitly explains that generations of inbreeding contributed to instability within the family. The Gaunts considered themselves superior because they descended from Slytherin. Yet that same obsession gradually destroyed their health, their social standing, and their ability to adapt to a changing world. Their pride became a prison. Among the relics preserved by the family was a heavy gold ring set with a black stone. Marvolo Gaunt treasured it above almost everything else. The ring bore the Peveril coat of arms, though Marvolo himself likely did not understand its full significance. He knew only that it was ancient and that it connected him to his ancestors. Decades later, the ring would become one of Lord Voldemort's Horcruxes. Later still, Albus Dumbledore would destroy it using the Sword of Gryffindor. But when we first encounter it in the family shack, It stands as a symbol of something larger, a bloodline desperately clinging to fragments of a glorious past. Another relic carried equal importance. The Gaunts possessed a locket marked with the ornate silver S that belonged to Salazar Slytherin himself. Marvolo repeatedly boasted about this treasure. Unlike many ancient family heirlooms, the locket's history was genuine. It had passed through generations of descendants until poverty forced Merope Gaunt to sell it. Years later, Tom Riddle would recover it and transform it into a Horcrux. The object survives as one of the clearest physical links between the founder and his descendants. Through the locket, you can almost trace a line from medieval Hogwarts to the Second Wizarding War. Why did the Gaunts value these artifacts so much while allowing everything else to crumble around them? The answer seems rooted in identity. They had lost wealth. They had lost influence. They had lost respect within the wider wizarding community. Yet they still possessed proof that they descended from Salazar Slytherin. Marvolo treated the ring and locket almost like sacred objects. They reassured him that his family remained special despite its condition. In a strange way, the relics became more important as the family circumstances worsened. The less they had in the present, the more tightly they grasped the past. The family itself consisted primarily of Marvolo Gaunt and his two children, Morphin and Merope. Morphin Gaunt displayed a gift that immediately identified the bloodline. He spoke Parseltongue fluently. When Ministry official Bob Ogden visited the Gaunt shack in the memory Dumbledore later showed Harry, Morphin spoke directly to a snake that slithered through the room. The language sounded strange and unsettling to listeners who did not understand it. Yet to the Gaunts, it represented proof of their heritage. Parseltongue had survived the centuries exactly as Slytherin intended. Morphin's behavior also reveals how far the family had fallen. He was violent, unstable, and openly hostile toward outsiders. During Ogden's visit, Morphin attacked a muggle named Tom Riddle Sr. after seeing him ride past on horseback. The Ministry later imprisoned Morphin in Azkaban for the assault. His actions reflected more than personal anger. They reflected beliefs that had hardened over generations. The Gaunts viewed muggles with contempt, echoing attitudes associated with Salazar Slytherin himself. Yet where the founder had been a respected wizard and political force, Morphin appeared trapped in bitterness and decline. What does this tell us about the true inheritance of Slytherin's line? It suggests that blood alone preserved very little. The Gaunts retained Parseltongue. They retained heirlooms. They retained pride in their ancestry, but they did not inherit Slytherin's stature, influence, or achievement. If anything, the contrast is startling. One generation built Hogwarts, another lived in a collapsing shack. The family preserved symbols of greatness while losing much of the greatness itself. That contradiction lies at the heart of their story. Merope Gaunt presents an even more fascinating contrast. Unlike her father and brother, she appeared timid and frightened. Dumbledore described her as oppressed by both men. She wore ragged clothing. She rarely spoke. The magical ability she possessed seemed weakened by years of abuse and neglect. Yet beneath that frightened exterior flowed the same bloodline that had produced Salazar Slytherin. The future of the family rested entirely with her, though neither Marvolo nor Morphin seemed to recognize it. Why is Merope so important to the mystery of the lost heirs? because with her, the story begins to change direction completely. For centuries, the descendants of Slytherin had obsessed over preserving blood purity. Then Merope fell in love with a muggle. The man was Tom Riddle Sr., a wealthy and handsome resident of Little Hangleton. He represented everything her family despised. Yet his arrival shattered the path the bloodline had followed for generations. Through Merope, the heirs of Slytherin would move toward a future neither Marvolo nor Morphin could have imagined. As the wind moves through the weeds surrounding the gaunt shack and the old family relics gleam faintly in the gloom, the long silence of the missing centuries begins to feel less mysterious. Perhaps the heirs of Slytherin did not disappear entirely. Perhaps they slowly collapsed inward generation after generation until only one fragile branch remained. And that final branch was about to produce a child who would become more famous than every descendant before him, a boy named Tom Marvolo Riddle. Why did the bloodline of Salazar Slytherin survive only to produce the darkest wizard in modern history? The question hangs over the story of Merope Gaunt like mist over the graveyard of Little Hangleton. By the time we reach her chapter in the family saga, the proud lineage that once traced itself to a Hogwarts founder exists inside a collapsing shack occupied by three unhappy people. Marvolo Gaunt rages about ancestry. Morphin Gaunt lashes out at anyone he considers beneath him. And Merope, the last hope of the family, moves quietly through the shadows of the house. Yet it is she, not her father or brother, who will determine the future of Slytherin's line. The turning point arrives in the summer of the early 1920s. Every day, Merope watches Tom Riddle Sr. ride past the Gaunt property. He is young, wealthy, handsome, and entirely unaware that a witch is watching him from behind broken windows and tangled weeds. Tom comes from the grand manor house overlooking Little Hangleton. The contrast between his life and Merope's could hardly be greater. One belongs to a respected Muggle family. The other belongs to a magical bloodline that has fallen into ruin. Yet Merope becomes deeply attached to him, and that attachment begins changing everything. Chew, why does Tom Riddle Sr. matter so much to the mystery of the heirs? Because his appearance marks the first major break in the pattern that had governed the bloodline for generations. The Gaunts spent centuries trying to preserve their ancestry through carefully guarded marriages and isolation from outsiders. Merope's feelings move in the opposite direction. Instead of looking backward toward family tradition, she looks outward toward a completely different life. Her choice ultimately abandons the path Marvolo spent his entire life defending. The irony is difficult to miss. The descendant who finally changes the fate of Slytherin's line is the one least interested in preserving its old customs. Canon provides a crucial sequence of events here. After Morphin attacks Tom Riddle Sr. and Marvolo threatens ministry official Bob Ogden, both men are sent to Azkaban. Suddenly, Merope finds herself alone. The constant fear that dominated her daily life disappears. Dumbledore later suggests that her magical abilities may have strengthened once the pressure of her abusive household was removed. Whatever the reason, she begins acting with a confidence previously unseen. Before long, Tom Riddle Sr. vanishes from Little Hangleton. Villagers soon notice something even stranger. Merope Gaunt has vanished as well. The explanation comes years later through memories collected by Albus Dumbledore. Merope used magic to begin a relationship with Tom Riddle Sr. Whether through a love potion or another magical influence, she brought him away from the village and started a new life with him. Canon strongly points toward the use of a love potion, though Dumbledore admits absolute certainty is impossible. What matters is that Tom's affection did not arise naturally. Their relationship rested upon enchantment rather than genuine love. This detail becomes deeply important when considering the future child born from that union. Why did Merope eventually stop using magic on Tom Riddle Sr.? Dumbledore offers one of the most revealing interpretations in the series. He believes Merope grew tired of maintaining the deception. Perhaps she hoped Tom had come to care for her genuinely. Perhaps she wished to be loved for herself, rather than through enchantment. Perhaps carrying a child convinced her that a real family could emerge from an artificial beginning. Whatever her reasoning, she eventually ended the magical influence. The result was immediate. Tom Riddle Sr. left her and returned to Little Hangleton. The villagers remembered the scandal for decades. Tom returned alone, frightened and angry. He spoke of having been tricked. Merope remained abandoned and pregnant. Here the story takes on a quieter sadness. For all the darkness associated with the Gaunts and their descendants, Merope herself never becomes a villain. She makes serious mistakes. She uses magic improperly, yet her story feels more tragic than malicious. The last daughter of Slytherin's line spends her life searching for affection and belonging, only to lose both when she needs them most. The winter of 1926 brings one of the most important moments in Harry Potter history. Weak, exhausted, and nearly penniless, Merope arrives at a London orphanage known as Wool's Orphanage. There she gives birth to a son on New Year's Eve. Before dying shortly afterward, she names him Tom Marvolo Riddle. The first name comes from his father. The middle name comes from Marvolo Gaunt. In that single name, two worlds meet. A wealthy Muggle family and the ancient line of Salazar Slytherin become joined forever. Why does Merope's death matter so profoundly to the mystery of the lost heirs? Because with her passing, nearly everything connecting the child to his ancestry disappears. Tom grows up without knowledge of the Gaunts. He never meets Marvolo. He never hears stories about Salazar Slytherin. He does not inherit family traditions, heirlooms, or guidance. The bloodline survives biologically, but its history is severed. In a strange sense, the heir of Slytherin begins life almost as an orphaned mystery, even to himself. At Wool's Orphanage, young Tom quickly displays unusual abilities. Long before he understands magic, he can speak to snakes. He can move objects without touching them. He can influence people through fear. When Albus Dumbledore visits him in the summer of 1938 to deliver his Hogwarts letter, Tom already knows he is different. He tells Dumbledore about making strange things happen. He speaks proudly about his abilities. The scene is remarkable because neither character yet mentions Salazar Slytherin, yet signs of the founder's inheritance are already visible. One detail stands out above all others. Tom does not merely possess magical talent. He hungers for identity. Growing up in the orphanage, he knows nothing about his parents. He does not know where he comes from. He does not know why He can speak to snakes. Throughout his adolescence, he searches obsessively for answers. The lost heir of Slytherin does not begin by seeking power. He begins by seeking his own origins. That search will eventually lead him to Hogwarts, to hidden records, to forgotten family history, and finally to the discovery that he descends from one of the school's founders. As snow falls outside Wool's orphanage and the final traces of Merope Gaunt fade into memory, the ancient bloodline enters a new phase. The heirs who once vanished into centuries of obscurity are no longer hidden. Their story now lives inside a brilliant, ambitious student, walking the corridors of Hogwarts. The question is no longer whether Slytherin's line survived. The question is what happens when its last known heir finally learns exactly who he is. Why did it take nearly 1,000 years for Salazar Slytherin's secret plan to succeed? The answer begins in September of 1938, when 11-year-old Tom Riddle arrives at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. He crosses the Black Lake with the other first-year students, passes beneath the enchanted ceiling of the Great Hall, and sits before the Sorting Hat. Within moments, the hat places him in Slytherin House. The choice feels almost inevitable in hindsight. Yet at the time, neither his classmates nor most of his teachers could have guessed that a direct descendant of Salazar Slytherin had just entered the castle. Tom quickly becomes one of the most gifted students Hogwarts has seen in generations. Professors admire his intelligence. Fellow students are drawn to his confidence and charm. He earns excellent marks across subjects. Horace Slughorn, who teaches potions and serves as head of Slytherin House, becomes particularly impressed by him. Years later, Slughorn would remember Tom as polite, talented, and exceptionally ambitious. This public image is important because it conceals a very different private life. Even as a teenager, Tom is already gathering secrets. Why does Tom become obsessed with his ancestry? The answer lies partly in the absence that defined his childhood. He knows he is a wizard, but he does not know who his parents were. He carries the name Tom Riddle, yet the name means little to him. Somewhere beyond the walls of Hogwarts lies a missing history. Unlike Harry Potter, who eventually learns about James and Lily through friends, photographs, and stories, Tom has almost nothing. The silence surrounding his origins becomes a puzzle he refuses to leave unsolved. At some point during his Hogwarts years, Tom begins investigating his family background. Canon does not describe every step of this search, but the outcome is clear. He discovers the connection between the Gaunts and Salazar Slytherin. He learns that his mother, Merope Gaunt, belonged to the ancient bloodline he had been seeking. He learns that his father was a muggle named Tom Riddle Sr. The first revelation fills him with pride. The second fills him with disgust. From that moment onward, he embraces one side of his heritage and rejects the other. The discovery changes more than his understanding of himself. It gives him access to one of Hogwarts' oldest mysteries. For centuries, stories circulated about the Chamber of Secrets. Students whispered about hidden passages. They repeated legends of a monster waiting beneath the school. Headmasters searched unsuccessfully for evidence. Teachers dismissed the tale as folklore. Yet Tom possesses something none of them have: the ability to speak Parseltongue. The language passed through generations of descendants precisely for this purpose. Why could no one else find the chamber? The answer reveals how cleverly Slytherin designed it. The entrance lay concealed behind a sink in a girl's bathroom on the second floor. To open it, a wizard needed to speak a command in Parseltongue. The mechanism responded not to force, magical power, or cleverness, but to a specific inherited gift. Thousands of students passed through Hogwarts without ever hearing the language. Even powerful headmasters such as Armando Dippet remained unaware of the entrance's true location. The chamber survived because its lock depended upon blood as much as magic. Around 1943, during his 5th year, Tom finally succeeds. Standing before the concealed entrance, he speaks in the language of serpents. The sink moves aside. The passage opens. For the first time in centuries, a descendant of Salazar Slytherin enters the Chamber of Secrets. Deep beneath Hogwarts, he discovers the giant basilisk hidden there by the founder. The creature has waited nearly a millennium. Now it hears the voice of an heir once again. The basilisk itself deserves attention because it reveals the scale of Slytherin's ambition. According to magical lore, basilisks are created through dark means by hatching a chicken egg beneath a toad. The practice has been outlawed for centuries because of the danger involved. A mature basilisk possesses deadly powers. Direct eye contact causes instant death. Indirect reflections can result in petrification. The serpent hidden beneath Hogwarts survived for generations beyond any ordinary lifespan, whether through enchantment, magical design, or mechanisms never fully explained. Slytherin ensured that his monster would remain ready for his heir. Why does Tom choose to use the basilisk at all? This question reaches beyond simple inheritance. Plenty of descendants might have discovered the chamber and left it untouched. Tom makes a different choice because he increasingly identifies not only with Slytherin's bloodline, but with his ideology. He sees himself as exceptional. He believes certain people are beneath him. The chamber offers more than a secret room. It offers proof that he belongs to a select lineage, stretching back to one of Hogwarts' founders. By controlling the basilisk, he confirms that identity to himself. The attacks begin quietly. Students hear strange noises in the walls. Fear spreads through the castle. Eventually, Myrtle Warren, a Ravenclaw student, enters the bathroom that conceals the chamber entrance. We know from her later testimony as Moaning Myrtle exactly what happened. She heard a boy speaking nearby. Annoyed, she emerged from a stall to tell him to leave. Then she saw a pair of enormous yellow eyes. Moments later, she died. Her death remains the only confirmed fatality during the chamber's opening in 1943. The murder creates a crisis for Hogwarts. Headmaster Armando Dippet considers closing the school. Teachers search desperately for the culprit. Students fear further attacks. Yet Tom Riddle remains outwardly calm. In fact, he uses the situation to strengthen his reputation. He understands something crucial. If the chamber is discovered and the school closes, he loses the place he values most. Hogwarts is more than a school to him. It is a home, an escape from the orphanage, and the center of the magical world he wishes to dominate. Why does Tom frame Rubeus Hagrid? Because Hagrid provides a convenient solution. At the time, Hagrid is a third-year student with a known fascination for dangerous creatures. He secretly keeps an acromantula named Aragog inside the castle. Tom reports this information to the authorities. The ministry and school staff conclude that Hagrid's creature must be responsible for the attacks. Hagrid is expelled. His wand is snapped. The chamber closes once more. Meanwhile, the true heir of Slytherin escapes suspicion entirely. The outcome is one of the most successful deceptions in wizarding history. Tom preserves his reputation. Hogwarts remains open. The basilisk survives hidden beneath the castle. The chamber returns to silence. And perhaps most importantly, the heir of Slytherin proves something to himself. He has not merely inherited the founder's blood, he has accomplished what generations of forgotten descendants never did. He found the chamber, he commanded the monster. He brought Slytherin's ancient secret back to life. Yet even this achievement is only the beginning of a far darker transformation that will soon carry the bloodline beyond anything its founder could have imagined. Did Tom Riddle become Slytherin's heir because of blood, or because he embodied the founder's darkest beliefs more completely than any descendant before him? The question becomes unavoidable after the events of 1943. Finding the Chamber of Secrets required ancestry. Controlling the basilisk required Parseltongue. Yet neither action explains what Tom chose to do afterward. Blood opened the door. Choice determined what happened once he stepped through it. Throughout the Harry Potter series, Rowling repeatedly distinguishes between inheritance and character, and nowhere is that distinction more important than in the story of Slytherin's lost heirs. After the chamber closes, Tom continues his education at Hogwarts with remarkable success. Professors praise him. Students admire him. He becomes head boy. During his final year, the contrast between public appearance and private reality grows sharper with each passing year. Behind the scenes, he pursues knowledge that most wizards fear to approach. He studies dark magic. He investigates immortality. He searches libraries for forbidden information. While other students prepare for careers, Tom is already imagining a future beyond ordinary human limits. Why does Tom become dissatisfied with simply being Slytherin's descendant? Because inheritance alone is never enough for him. During his conversation with Horace Slughorn, preserved decades later in a memory, Tom asks about Horcruxes. He appears calm and curious, yet the question itself reveals extraordinary ambition. A Horcrux requires the deliberate splitting of the soul through murder. Most wizards never even consider such magic. Tom not only studies it, but seeks ways to use it repeatedly. At this point, he is no longer trying to preserve a family legacy. He is trying to transcend mortality itself. The artifacts passed down through Slytherin's bloodline become central to this transformation. The ring, once worn by Marvolo Gaunt, eventually returns to Tom's possession. The locket of Salazar Slytherin also comes into his hands after years of searching. These objects begin as heirlooms. Under Tom's influence, they become something else entirely. He chooses them specifically because of their historical significance. In his mind, ordinary objects are unworthy of housing fragments of his soul. Relics connected to founders and ancient magical families feel more appropriate. Why does Tom place such importance on symbolic objects? The answer reveals how deeply ancestry shapes his thinking. He rejects his Muggle father completely. He abandons the name Tom Riddle and eventually adopts the identity of Lord Voldemort. Yet he never abandons the prestige associated with his mother's bloodline. In fact, he elevates it. Slytherin's locket becomes a Horcrux. The Gaunt ring becomes a Horcrux. The founder's legacy becomes woven into Voldemort's quest for immortality. Rather than preserving the inheritance he received, he consumes it and remakes it according to his own ambitions. One of the darkest moments in this transformation occurs when Tom returns to Little Hangleton. By now, he has uncovered the truth about his parents. He knows that Tom Riddle Sr. abandoned Merope. He knows that his father was a Muggle. Canon confirms that Voldemort murders his father and paternal grandparents. He then frames Morphin Gaunt for the crime through memory manipulation. Morphin spends the remainder of his life believing he committed murders he never committed. With this act, Tom effectively destroys what remains of both sides of his family history. The murder of the Riddles carries enormous significance for the story of Slytherin's heirs. Marvolo is dead. Merope is dead. Morphin is imprisoned and broken. Tom Riddle Sr. and his parents are dead. The bloodline narrows until it essentially exists in one person. Generations of descendants vanish behind him. The founder's lineage, once spread across centuries, becomes concentrated in a single wizard. Voldemort stands at the end of a very long chain, yet unlike most heirs, he shows little interest in passing anything forward. Why does Voldemort never attempt to create a family of his own? The books never provide a direct answer, which leaves room for interpretation. His obsession centers on power, not continuity. Ancient families often think in generations. They preserve names, estates, and traditions. Voldemort thinks differently. He seeks personal immortality. The future he imagines contains himself ruling forever, rather than descendants carrying on his work. In a strange way, the final known heir of Slytherin becomes the first who no longer cares whether the bloodline survives beyond him. The contrast between Voldemort and Salazar Slytherin becomes especially interesting here. Slytherin clearly expected future descendants. The Chamber of Secrets only makes sense if heirs continue appearing generation after generation. Voldemort, by contrast, increasingly separates himself from ordinary human concerns. His body changes through dark magic. His appearance grows less human. His name changes. Even his soul is fragmented. The founder built a legacy for descendants. The descendant eventually abandons the very idea of succession. Why do so many readers assume Voldemort represents the perfect fulfillment of Slytherin's vision? The answer lies in the obvious similarities. Both value blood purity. Both possess Parseltongue. Both leave powerful magical legacies behind. Yet the comparison has limits. Salazar Slytherin helped create Hogwarts. Voldemort repeatedly tries to dominate or destroy parts of the wizarding world. Slytherin built institutions. Voldemort corrupts them. The heir resembles the founder in important ways, but he is not merely a copy. He is his own dark creation. As Lord Voldemort rises to power during the First Wizarding War, the title Heir of Slytherin becomes less important than the identity he has forged for himself. Followers gather around him. The Death Eaters fear and worship him. Ancient pure-blood families align with his cause. Yet most of them do not even know the full truth of his ancestry. Few realize that the feared Dark Lord once lived in a Muggle orphanage. Fewer still understand that he descends directly from the founder whose name echoes through Slytherin House. The ancient bloodline survives, but it now wears a mask. This raises another mystery. If the Gaunts represented the last known descendants of Salazar Slytherin, Why does wizarding history preserve no evidence of other branches? Across nearly 1,000 years, could an entire bloodline truly narrow to a single family living in poverty near Little Hangleton? Or have other descendants remained hidden beyond the edges of the story all along? To answer that question, we must leave Voldemort's rise behind for a time and return to the centuries of silence where the missing heirs vanished from view. Could other descendants of Salazar Slytherin have survived unnoticed while the Gaunts claimed exclusive inheritance? It is one of the most intriguing questions left unresolved by canon. Throughout the Harry Potter series, the Gaunts are presented as direct descendants of Slytherin, and no other family is given that distinction. Yet being the only documented branch is not necessarily the same thing as being the only branch. Wizarding history contains gaps, missing records, vanished families, and forgotten lines of inheritance. When nearly 1,000 years separate Salazar Slytherin from Marvolo Gaunt, the possibility of lost descendants becomes difficult to ignore. The first thing worth remembering is how little medieval wizarding genealogy survives in the books. Hogwarts itself was founded around the 10th century. The exact dates of many early magical events remain uncertain. Entire generations pass between known historical figures with few surviving details. Even the lives of the four founders are preserved through fragments, legends, and scattered accounts. If historians struggle to reconstruct the personal lives of Hogwarts creators, tracing every descendant across 10 centuries becomes nearly impossible. The silence surrounding Slytherin's family may reflect missing history rather than a complete absence of heirs. Another factor lies in the nature of magical inheritance itself. Parseltongue appears repeatedly within the Gaunt family, making them easy to identify as descendants. Yet magical traits do not always manifest predictably. Throughout the wizarding world, abilities emerge unevenly across generations. Some magical gifts strengthen, others fade. Certain descendants may never realize they possess a connection to an ancient bloodline. If a branch of Slytherin's family lost the ability to speak Parseltongue, future generations might retain the ancestry without retaining the most visible marker of it. Why would a descendant choose not to advertise a connection to Salazar Slytherin? The answer changes depending on the century. In some eras, such ancestry might have brought prestige. In others, it might have attracted unwanted attention. After the Chamber of Secrets became associated with attacks on students, public identification with Slytherin's bloodline could easily become uncomfortable. Following Voldemort's rise, the situation becomes even more complicated. Being linked to the same ancestry as the Dark Lord would hardly be an advantage. Silence can preserve a family just as effectively as publicity. Canon provides examples of ancient families becoming intertwined through generations of marriage. The Black family tapestry reveals connections to the Malfoys, Weasleys, Longbottoms, Prewets, Crouches, and many others. Sirius Black famously remarks that most old wizarding families are related if you go back far enough. This observation matters because it reminds us how interconnected pureblood society actually is. If Slytherin's descendants married into other lines over centuries, traces of the founder's ancestry could have spread widely. The bloodline may have become diluted, hidden, or simply forgotten. Popular fan theory builds upon this possibility. Some readers suggest that other pure-blood families may contain distant descendants of Slytherin through undocumented marriages. The theory remains entirely speculative. Rowling never confirmed such connections. Yet it appeals to many fans because it explains how a 1,000-year-old bloodline could survive without remaining concentrated in a single family. Medieval dynasties in both magical and non-magical history rarely remain isolated forever. Over enough generations, ancestry tends to spread outward in unexpected ways. Why then did the Gaunts insist they were the sole heirs? Their behavior offers an answer. Marvolo Gaunt treated ancestry as a source of status. His family's wealth had vanished, their social influence had vanished, their reputation had largely vanished as well. The claim of direct descent from Salazar Slytherin became one of the few remaining assets they possessed. From Marvolo's perspective, exclusivity increased its value. Whether or not distant cousins existed elsewhere, the Gaunts presented themselves as the last authentic continuation of the founder's line. The relics they preserved strengthened that claim. The ring and the locket served as tangible evidence unavailable to any rival family. These objects connected the Gaunts directly to the founder through an unbroken chain of inheritance. Even if other descendants survived somewhere in Wizarding Britain, they apparently lacked comparable proof. The artifacts transformed family tradition into something more concrete. A person could question a genealogy. It was harder to question Slytherin's own possessions, resting inside the family home. Another mystery emerges when considering the Chamber of Secrets itself. The entrance responds to Parseltongue, not surnames. It does not require a Gaunt. It does not require a riddle. It responds to the language inherited through Slytherin's bloodline. This detail creates an intriguing possibility. If another descendant inherited Parseltongue, that person could theoretically have opened the chamber. The mechanism cares about magical inheritance rather than family records, yet across centuries, no confirmed individual, aside from Tom Riddle, ever accomplished this feat. Why did no other heir step forward before Voldemort? One explanation is simple. There may not have been another heir capable of doing so. Another explanation is more interesting. Perhaps descendants existed but never discovered the chamber. Hogwarts is vast. The entrance remained hidden behind an ordinary sink. Even knowing the legend would not reveal its location, a Parselmouth could walk the castle's corridors for years without realizing what lay beneath them. The founder's secret was protected not only by blood, but by obscurity. The story of Corvinus Gaunt adds another layer to the mystery. In Rowling's supplementary writings about the Gaunt family, Corvinus appears as an ancestor who carried the line forward generations before Marvolo. Yet even here, the family tree remains incomplete. We receive selected names rather than a comprehensive genealogy stretching back to the Middle Ages. Large sections remain blank. Historians often describe missing pieces of evidence as negative space, areas where absence itself becomes meaningful. The Gaunt lineage contains a great deal of such negative space. What makes the mystery so enduring is that it can never be completely solved within existing canon. We know the beginning. Salazar Slytherin founded Hogwarts and left descendants. We know the end. The line reaches Marvolo, Merope, Morphin, and eventually Tom Riddle. Between those points, stretches nearly a millennium of largely undocumented history. The gaps invite questions that the books deliberately leave unanswered. They encourage the imagination without requiring contradictions. Some of the most compelling mysteries in the wizarding world survive precisely because they remain incomplete. As the centuries drift past in silence, one fact remains clear. Whether hidden branches existed or not, the known line of Salazar Slytherin eventually narrowed to a single heir who reshaped wizarding history. The founder's blood survived long enough to reach Tom Riddle, yet blood alone did not determine the future. In the end, the fate of the line would depend not on forgotten ancestors, but on a battle fought in the Great Hall of Hogwarts, where the last known heir of Slytherin would finally meet his end. Did the bloodline of Salazar Slytherin truly end on the night Lord Voldemort died? The question carries a peculiar weight because so much of wizarding history seems to point toward that final confrontation. For nearly 1,000 years, descendants of the founder passed from generation to generation. The line survived wars, political upheaval, forgotten centuries, and the collapse of the Gaunt family. Then, on May 2nd, 1998, in the Great Hall of Hogwarts, the last known descendant fell. If the story ended there, it would be remarkably simple. Yet the deeper you examine the aftermath, the more complicated the answer becomes. The Battle of Hogwarts brought together nearly every major thread of the series. Students, teachers, members of the Order of the Phoenix, and defenders from across the wizarding world gathered within the castle. Voldemort returned to the place where he had once been Tom Riddle, the brilliant student who opened the Chamber of Secrets. The setting itself mattered. Hogwarts had shaped both Salazar Slytherin and his final known heir. The founder helped build the castle. The descendant ultimately died inside it. There is a strange symmetry in that arc. When Harry Potter and Voldemort face one another before the surviving defenders of Hogwarts, the confrontation is about far more than power. Harry understands something Voldemort does not. The Elder Wand's allegiance belongs to Harry, because Draco Malfoy disarmed Albus Dumbledore, and Harry later disarmed Draco. Voldemort believes ownership comes through possession of the wand. Harry understands that magical loyalty follows different rules. The distinction echoes a theme present throughout the history of Slytherin's heirs. Blood and inheritance matter, but they are never the whole story. Why does Voldemort's death matter specifically to the mystery of the bloodline? Because canon never identifies any children, spouse, or acknowledged descendants. Unlike many ancient families, the line appears to stop with him. Marvolo is gone. Morphin dies in Azkaban. Merope dies shortly after childbirth. Voldemort never creates a family. The chain that stretches back to the 10th century reaches a dead end. At least within the main canon of the books, no living successor emerges to claim the inheritance. One consequence often overlooked is the disappearance of Parseltongue from the line. For centuries, the ability served as the clearest marker of Slytherin's descendants. The Gaunts possessed it. Voldemort possessed it. Harry temporarily possessed it because a fragment of Voldemort's soul resided within him. After the destruction of that fragment during the events of the Second Wizarding War, Rowling later stated that Harry lost the ability. The founder's signature gift effectively vanishes from the central narrative. A language spoken across generations falls silent. Yet another relic of the bloodline survives. Deep beneath Hogwarts, the Chamber of Secrets still exists. Harry, Ron Weasley, and Hermione Granger enter it during the search for Horcruxes. Ron gains access by imitating Parseltongue sounds he heard Harry use years earlier. Inside the chamber, Basilisk remains still, lie scattered where the creature died in 1993. The enormous skeleton serves as a reminder that the founder's legacy did not disappear with his descendants. The bloodline may end, but the consequences of its actions remain physically present. Why does the chamber outlive the heirs, who were meant to control it? The answer reveals something fascinating about magical history. Buildings, enchantments, and artifacts often survive longer than families. Hogwarts itself outlives generations of headmasters and students. The sword of Gryffindor persists long after Godric's death. Ravenclaw's diadem survives centuries before becoming a Horcrux. Hufflepuff's cup passes through many hands. In the same way, Slytherin's chamber remains after the family line reaches its apparent conclusion. Stone remembers what blood forgets. The destruction of Voldemort's Horcruxes also transforms the inheritance left behind by the founder. Slytherin's locket no longer contains a fragment of a soul. The gaunt ring no longer serves as a vessel of dark magic. Both objects survive, but their purpose changes. For years, they represented corruption and obsession. After the war, they become historical artifacts once more. Their connection to Salazar Slytherin remains intact even after Voldemort's influence is removed. In a sense, the heirs' darkest alterations are stripped away, leaving older history visible beneath them. A curious detail emerges when considering Slytherin House after the war. The house itself survives untouched by the apparent extinction of the bloodline. Students continue arriving each year. The green and silver banners remain. New generations wear serpent-emblazoned robes. This is important because Rowling consistently separates Slytherin House from the actions of any single descendant. Not every Slytherin becomes a dark wizard. Characters such as Horace Slughorn demonstrate that ambition and resourcefulness can exist without cruelty. The founder's legacy becomes broader than his family. Why do so many people assume that ending Voldemort's line ends Slytherin's influence? The book suggests something more nuanced. Ideas often outlive the people who champion them. Hogwarts continues teaching students long after the founders' deaths. The lessons of Dumbledore remain important after his passing. Even the mistakes of history continue shaping future generations. Slytherin's influence persists through the house that bears his name, through stories told in classrooms, and through the lingering mysteries embedded within the castle. The end of a bloodline does not erase a legacy. There is also the unresolved question left behind by the gaps in the historical record. We know Voldemort is the last known descendant. Known is the crucial word. The wizarding world has been wrong before. Entire chambers remained hidden beneath Hogwarts for centuries. Family histories disappeared and resurfaced. Forgotten truths emerged from pensive memories, diaries, and ancient documents. Canon provides no evidence of another heir after Voldemort, but it also never declares with absolute certainty that no distant descendant exists anywhere in the world. The silence remains. As dawn begins to approach the ruined battlements of Hogwarts, After the battle, the ancient line of Salazar Slytherin seems to fade into history. The founder's descendants no longer stand at the center of events. The basilisk is dead. The Horcruxes are destroyed. Voldemort has fallen. Yet one final question remains before the mystery can rest. If bloodlines vanish and heirs disappear, what was the true inheritance passed down through the centuries? Was it ancestry itself, or something far more enduring? If bloodlines fade, families vanish, and heirs die without successors, what was Salazar Slytherin actually passing down through the centuries? The question becomes especially important after the fall of Voldemort. At first glance, the answer seems obvious. Slytherin passed down ancestry. He passed down Parseltongue. He passed down heirlooms such as the locket that eventually became one of Voldemort's Horcruxes. Yet when you look carefully at the history of the descendants themselves, these inheritances seem strangely insufficient. None of them alone explain why the story endured for nearly 1,000 years. Consider Parseltongue the most recognizable inheritance of all. The ability appears again and again whenever the bloodline surfaces. Salazar Slytherin possessed it. Morphin Gaunt possessed it. Merope understood it. Tom Riddle wielded it fluently. Harry Potter briefly acquired it through the fragment of Voldemort's soul that attached itself to him in 1981. The language serves almost like a thread connecting distant generations, yet language alone never determined destiny. Morphin spent much of his life trapped in misery. Harry remained a hero despite speaking the same language as Voldemort. The gift carried no moral instruction. Why did Slytherin choose a language as the key to his greatest secret? The answer may reveal how he viewed inheritance itself. A magical artifact can be stolen. A written password can be forgotten. Parseltongue lives within the individual. It passes naturally through family lines. By designing the chamber around this ability, Slytherin ensured that descendants would remain connected to his legacy even if every written record disappeared. The chamber's entrance beneath the bathroom sink responds not to status, wealth, or political power. It responds to a voice carrying something ancient within it. Another inheritance traveled through the centuries in physical form. Salazar Slytherin's locket survived the rise and fall of kingdoms, the creation of the Ministry of Magic, and countless changes in the wizarding world. For generations, descendants preserved it as proof of their ancestry. Merope Gaunt eventually sold it when poverty left her desperate for money. Decades later, Voldemort tracked it down and transformed it into a Horcrux. The object's history becomes almost a miniature version of the bloodline itself. It begins as a founder's possession, passes through forgotten descendants, falls into darkness, and finally emerges into the light again after the war. The ring follows a similarly remarkable journey. Long before Marvolo Gaunt wore it in the shack near Little Hangleton, it belonged to the Peveril family. Through inheritance and marriage, it entered the line that eventually produced the Gaunts. Voldemort later used it as a Horcrux. Albus Dumbledore destroyed the Horcrux hidden within it, but suffered a fatal curse in the process. The ring therefore connects multiple stories at once. The Peverils, the Gaunts, Voldemort, Dumbledore, and even the Deathly Hallows. It demonstrates how one inherited object can accumulate layers of meaning over centuries. Why do these relics matter so much when the descendants themselves often fail to live up to their ancestors? because objects preserve memory differently than people do. Marvolo Gaunt misunderstood much of his own family history, yet he still possessed authentic heirlooms. Voldemort twisted their purpose, yet he still recognized their significance. Even after both men died, the artifacts remained evidence that the bloodline had once existed. The objects endured, while the family itself gradually disappeared. In this sense, the relics became guardians of history. The Chamber of Secrets represents another form of inheritance entirely. Unlike the ring or locket, it was never meant to be carried from one generation to the next. It remained fixed beneath Hogwarts. The chamber waited patiently while dynasties rose and fell above it. Students attended classes, headmasters came and went. Entire wars passed. Through all of it, the hidden chamber remained unchanged. The founder effectively left a message carved into the structure of the castle itself. Why does the chamber feel so different from other magical secrets? Because it functions almost like a conversation across time. When Tom Riddle opened it in 1943, he was responding to a plan created nearly 1,000 years earlier. When Ginny Weasley was manipulated through Tom Riddle's diary in 1992, she became entangled in that same ancient design. When Harry entered the chamber and faced the basilisk, he confronted a danger created long before his birth. Each generation interacted with the founder's legacy directly. The chamber connected people separated by centuries. Yet the most powerful inheritance may not have been magical at all. It may have been an idea. Salazar Slytherin believed certain people belonged inside the magical world and others did not. That belief survived far beyond his lifetime. Elements of it appeared among descendants, such as the Gaunts. Variations of it influenced pure-blood supremacist movements. Voldemort built much of his political rhetoric around related themes, even though he concealed his own half-blood origins. The founder's ideas traveled farther than his bloodline ever could. This distinction helps explain something often overlooked in the series. Many descendants inherited Slytherin's blood, but not all inherited his convictions. Merope Gaunt broke with family tradition by falling in love with a muggle. Harry possessed a Parseltongue for years, without embracing pure-blood ideology. Even within Slytherin House, students varied enormously in character. Horace Slughorn valued talent and connections, but ultimately opposed Voldemort. Severus Snape began on a dark path, yet sacrificed his life helping defeat the Dark Lord. Blood never dictated belief. Why is that lesson so important to the mystery of the lost heirs? Because it reveals the limits of ancestry. The Gaunts spent generations worshiping their lineage. Voldemort built part of his identity around it. Yet again and again, the books show that choices matter more than inherited traits. Albus Dumbledore tells Harry in Chamber of Secrets that it is choices that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities. The statement applies perfectly to the descendants of Salazar Slytherin. Their blood opened certain doors. Their decisions determined what happened after they stepped through them. As the years after the Second Wizarding War pass quietly over Hogwarts, the surviving relics of the Founder remain scattered through history. The chamber still lies beneath the castle. Stories about the Gaunts still exist in memories and records. The house bearing Slytherin's name continues welcoming students. Yet the question lingering in the darkness is no longer about inheritance alone. It is about survival. Did the heirs disappear, while their legacy remained? Or did something of them endure in ways the wizarding world has never fully understood? The answer waits in the final chapter of the mystery. In the end, which survived longer, the heirs themselves, or the idea of being Slytherin's heir? As our journey reaches its final stretch, this question feels larger than any genealogy. The known descendants of Salazar Slytherin can be counted on a surprisingly short list: Marvolo Gaunt, Morphin Gaunt, Merope Gaunt, Tom Marvolo Riddle. Beyond them stretches a long corridor of missing centuries, filled with names lost to history. Yet the idea of the heir endured with extraordinary strength. It survived long enough to shape the destiny of Hogwarts itself. One reason the idea proved so powerful is that Slytherin built it directly into the castle. The Chamber of Secrets was never merely a hidden room. It was a promise aimed at the future. Somewhere in the 10th century, a founder who feared the direction of Hogwarts created a mechanism that depended upon descendants not yet born. He trusted blood to carry his intentions across generations. He trusted inheritance to succeed where persuasion had failed. Every time students whispered about the chamber, they unknowingly kept that promise alive. Why did the legend persist, even when evidence remained scarce? The answer lies partly in Hogwarts itself. The castle encourages stories. Moving staircases shift unexpectedly. Ghosts wander the corridors. Portraits speak. Hidden passages connect distant rooms. In such a place, legends rarely disappear completely. Students passed stories from one generation to the next. The chamber became one of the oldest and most persistent. Most listeners doubted it existed, yet the story survived because Hogwarts always felt like the sort of place where forgotten truths might still be waiting behind a wall. When Harry Potter first hears about the chamber during his second year, the legend has already lasted nearly a millennium. Draco Malfoy repeats stories about the heir of Slytherin. Professor Binns reluctantly explains the tale to the class. Hermione Granger researches historical accounts in the library. None of these students know they are standing at the edge of a mystery that began before the Norman conquest of England. The remarkable thing is not that the legend survived. The remarkable thing is how much of it turned out to be true. Why does Harry's role matter so much in the story of the heirs? Because he becomes the person who finally breaks the cycle. Tom Riddle opened the chamber as Slytherin's descendant. Ginny Weasley was manipulated into reopening it through Riddle's diary. Harry enters the chamber not as an heir, but as an opponent. Armed with the sword of Gryffindor, assisted by Fawkes the Phoenix and guided by Dumbledore's faith in him, he defeats the Basilisk and destroys the diary Horcrux. In doing so, he interrupts a plan that had survived for centuries. The chamber's purpose ends even though the chamber itself remains. The contrast between Harry and Voldemort reveals something profound about inheritance. Both can speak Parseltongue for a time. Both enter the Chamber of Secrets. Both possess unusual connections to Salazar Slytherin's legacy, yet their choices move in opposite directions. Voldemort sees the chamber as a weapon. Harry sees it as a threat that must be stopped. The same ancient secret encounters two different individuals and produces two different outcomes. The founder's inheritance proves less powerful than personal character. Another intriguing detail appears when we consider what future generations are likely to know. Students after the war grow up in a different world. Battle of Hogwarts becomes history. Voldemort becomes a figure studied in books rather than feared in daily life. The Chamber of Secrets transforms from a hidden mystery into a documented fact. Historians can trace the line from Salazar Slytherin to the Gaunts and then to Voldemort. Yet many questions remain unanswered. The missing centuries are still missing. The undocumented heirs are still undocumented. Certain shadows refuse to disappear. Why do those unanswered questions matter? Because they keep the story alive. A mystery completely solved often becomes static. A mystery with one or two missing pieces continues inviting attention. Readers return to the gaps between Slytherin and the Gaunts. They wonder whether forgotten descendants existed. They speculate about family branches lost to time. They examine ancient wizarding genealogies looking for clues. Canon never fully closes the door. It leaves enough darkness around the edges for curiosity to endure. A popular fan theory suggests that distant descendants of Slytherin may still exist somewhere in the wider wizarding world without realizing it. The theory remains exactly that, a theory. Rowling has never confirmed surviving heirs after Voldemort, yet the idea persists because it feels consistent with how ancestry works across long periods of history. 10 centuries is an immense span of time. Families divide, merge, relocate, and forget. If unknown descendants survived, they would likely be ordinary witches and wizards living unremarkable lives rather than dark lords searching for hidden chambers. The possibility remains intriguing precisely because it cannot be proven. At the same time, another interpretation carries equal weight. Perhaps the known story is the complete story. Perhaps the line truly narrowed generation by generation until only Voldemort remained. There's a certain tragic symmetry in that outcome. A founder who placed such faith in blood eventually leaves behind a lineage that consumes itself. The Gaunts collapse under obsession. Voldemort pursues immortality rather than succession. The family ends not through outside destruction, but through choices made within it. The serpent eventually bites its own tail. As you look back across the centuries, the pattern becomes clearer. Salazar Slytherin left Hogwarts and concealed a basilisk beneath the school. His descendants carried Parseltongue through generation after generation. The Gaunts preserved relics while losing almost everything else. Merope gave birth to Tom Riddle. Tom discovered the chamber, became Lord Voldemort, and died in the Great Hall. The bloodline rises, narrows, and disappears. Yet the story remains. Students still learn the names of the founders. Slytherin House still exists. The chamber still sleeps beneath the castle stones. And so we return to where we began. Deep beneath Hogwarts, far below the sleeping portraits and silent corridors, damp stone glimmers in the faint light of a solitary torch. The carved serpent remains on the wall, exactly as it stood centuries ago. The voices of the heirs have faded. The families are gone. The basilisk is dead. Yet the chamber endures, holding its silence beneath the castle, while the wizarding world above continues onward generation after generation, unaware of how many lives once revolved around a single ancient bloodline. When you follow the story of Slytherin's lost heirs, all the way to its end, something unexpected emerges from the darkness. At first, it seems to be a tale about blood. The Chamber of Secrets is locked behind inherited magic. Parseltongue passes from parent to child. Ancient heirlooms move through generations. Entire lives are shaped by ancestry. Yet the deeper you travel into Rowling's world, the more clearly you see that blood is never the final answer. Blood opens doors. Blood preserves memories. Blood carries history forward, but it never decides what a person becomes. That truth appears again and again throughout the line of Salazar Slytherin. Marvolo Gaunt inherited one of the oldest bloodlines in Britain and spent his life clinging to its reputation while everything around him collapsed. Merope Gaunt inherited the same ancestry and chose love, however tragically and imperfectly. Tom Riddle inherited the same gifts and transformed them into weapons. Harry Potter briefly shared one of the line's most famous abilities and remained everything Voldemort could never be. The blood remained constant. The choices did not. Across centuries of wizarding history, that distinction quietly governs almost every important event. There is also a lesson here about memory. The descendants themselves fade surprisingly quickly. Most witches and wizards in Harry's time know almost nothing about the Gaunts. Entire generations vanish from the historical record. Names disappear. Faces are forgotten. Yet ideas endure. Salazar Slytherin's fears survived long after his death. His chamber survived. His symbols survived. His reputation survived. Rowling's world repeatedly shows that people leave behind more than descendants. They leave behind beliefs, institutions, prejudices, hopes, and stories. Those inheritances often prove more durable than bloodlines. The tragedy of Voldemort lies partly in his misunderstanding of this truth. He believed immortality meant preserving himself forever. He fragmented his soul. He collected relics. He sought mastery over death itself. Yet what actually survives him is not his power. His empire collapses in a single night. His followers scatter. His magical achievements become warnings in history books. Meanwhile, the things he dismissed as weaknesses, friendship, loyalty, sacrifice, love, continue shaping the future. In the end, Harry leaves a far greater legacy than Voldemort precisely because he never tried to make himself immortal. Perhaps that is why the story of Slytherin's heirs feels so complete, despite all its unanswered questions. We never learn every name. We never uncover every branch of the family tree. We never fully illuminate the missing centuries between the founder and the Gaunts. Yet the mystery remains satisfying because its deeper meaning becomes clear. The line begins with a wizard who trusted blood to preserve his vision. It ends in a world where blood matters far less than character. The arc bends away from inheritance and toward choice. The founders' descendants spend centuries proving the very lesson they often failed to understand. And now, as the castle settles into silence once more, you can almost imagine that hidden place beneath Hogwarts, waiting in the darkness. The basilisk is gone. The heirs are gone. The voices that once echoed through the chamber have fallen silent. Only the old stone remains, cool with underground moisture and marked by the serpent carved there long ago. Somewhere a torch flickers gently against the wall, its light trembling across ancient scales of carved rock, while far above, another generation sleeps peacefully in the castle that outlived them all.